Yeah. I've started already. You can come in. I'm not starting for 10 minutes. Hi, Lance and Andre and Elizabeth. Yeah. I've started already. Come on in. I'm not starting for 10 minutes. Hi, Lance and Andre. I started, but I'm not talking for a little while. I'm taking this time to share. I'm starting at 8 o'clock. I started, but I'm not talking for a little while. I'm taking this time to share. I'm starting at 8 o'clock. Here, you need this? Okay. Okay. I wish you'd come in and get it. I'm using this time to share. It's live. I'm telling you it's live. Hi, Dolores. I'm starting at 8 o'clock. I'm using this time to share because I always start too late and I scramble and I don't want to do that, so I'm taking my time. If you wouldn't mind sharing around, this is the time to do it. I'm going to get start right at 8 o'clock. So thank you for sharing this around to groups of where people should learn this. Test 1, 2, 3. How is this? Is this still echoing? I got a message that it is echoing. Does it sound okay? Someone tell me how this sounds, if it's echoing or if it's loud enough. Oh, you heard echo because I had the volume up. So the volume was going into the microphone from my iPad. I think that's what the problem was. Alright, I'm still getting a message that it is echoing. I don't hear any echo. I don't hear anything. So one person's saying it's echoing. 2 people are saying that it's okay. Elizabeth, maybe restart your Facebook or something. I think it is, because 4 people now are saying that it's okay. My mic is right here. It's not far from my mouth. It worked. This is what I did. This is what I've been doing. Anyway, I need to share. Still got a couple minutes to share. 4 minutes. Why is this guy showing up in my feed? Sorry, you don't have to be here. Thank you, Lance. So the sound is good according to Lance. We're going to get started in just a couple minutes. Okay. Just about 8 o'clock. Okay. I think I should start. I think I'm going to start. All right, so please do turn up your volume as high as you can go. If you have the option of using headphones, please do that. Hopefully this is going to sound okay. People say that it's generally okay. So, okay. All right, I think it's time to start. I'm going to get right into this. This has dramatically changed over the past few weeks, so I had to totally rewrite my notes for the first time since I spoke with Graham. I've edited it since I've had my notes that I used with Graham, and I've edited them, but it has changed so much that I had to totally rewrite my notes for this one. So I hope that this is improved. Thanks, Elizabeth. I see your message. I hope this is improved. I am, of course, looking for feedback. Please give me feedback. I am going to do this in 3 parts. I'm going to blow through each of the parts, and then I'll take a break and look at your messages. This is going to be likely more than an hour. My goal is to get it down to an hour, but my first priority is to get it solid and I think it's starting to click in that way. So I'm going to plug through this first section, and then after the first section, I am going to look at your comments, and we'll talk for a few minutes. Then I'll do part 2, and same thing with part 3. So let's get right down to it. So we are learning modern money, modern monetary theory, MMT. I call it modern money. Before I even start, I want to make it clear what my role is. I am not a teacher. I am not an expert. I am not an economist. There are many MMT economists and experts around the world who have decades of research to back up what they say and to back up what everybody says. They're the teachers. They're my teachers. I am a student. It is not my job to teach. That is left to them. However, I am an activist. This has been a large topic in Real Progressives for a couple weeks. I am an activist. What I can do is I can reach out to the people who didn't know that this was a subject or hadn't considered learning this before, and I can introduce them to modern money. And then as soon as we are done, ask follow-up questions and whatever. But as soon as we are done, it is time to go on to the experts, because I am not an expert. So once your eyes are open to modern money, once you've asked me whatever clarifications you want, my job is done, and now it is up to the experts, the economists, to take over from there. So let's get started. I don't know if this is going to work, but I would like to ask the people who do not know modern money, if there's anyone in the audience that does not know modern money, to answer this question in the comments. And actually, I'm not even sure I'm going to be able to see those comments later, because comments expire when you're on the live stream. I can only see them after the live stream ends. But still, my question to you is, why do we pay federal taxes? Why do they collect federal taxes? I'm not talking state, I'm not talking municipal, but why do they collect federal taxes? Why are they used? What are they used for? We're going to come back to that. I'm just laying the question out there. I'm hoping that we're going to get some good answers, and then we'll come back to that later and talk about those answers. So why do we pay federal taxes? What are they used for? So, okay. And now, another question, which is, where does money come from? So, physical money, dollar bills, and coins are important, but they're not nearly as prevalent as the money in our bank accounts, the money in a computer, the electronic money, numbers in a computer. So we're going to set aside physical money for today. So I want to ask you, where does money come from? So you have money in your bank account and you got it somewhere. Where did you get it? So some common answers are, I got it from my paycheck. I got it from my patrons. If I have a Patreon account, I got it from my patrons. I got it from, I sell merchandise, and I got it from someone who purchased my merchandise. So I got it from my paycheck. Where did the company get it? The company gave it to me, so where did they get it? They got it from their customers. They got it, where did the customer get it? And on and on and on and on and on. And ultimately, the answer is that money came from the Federal Reserve. So the Federal Reserve who actually creates our money. But they don't just create it because they want to. They create it because the Treasury told them to. And the Treasury doesn't just tell them to because they want to. The Treasury is told by a new law that is signed by the President. And the law that is signed by the President, it was written by Congress. So the United States Congress, the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, says that the United States Congress gets to create the money. They are the monopoly currency issuer, which we'll talk about. So it's the Congress writes a bill into a law. The President signs that law. That law instructs the Treasury. The Treasury instructs the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve creates the money by turning up numbers in electronic form in the computers. Then that money filters down to the state reserves. Then the state reserves filter down to local banks, and then it goes to the people and to companies. So the answer is the Federal Reserve. I need, when we speak tonight, I'm asking you to have an open mind. I'm asking you to, I'm not advanced enough to be able to handle a lot of the skepticism and conspiracy theories that are out there. After we're done, you should absolutely be as skeptical as you need to be. Do your homework and decide the truth for yourself. But while we're talking tonight, please have an open mind. So the Federal Reserve, there are some alternative views for the Federal Reserve, such as the Federal Reserve commands Congress. The Congress has to ask the Federal Reserve for money. And if that's true, then this entire talk, this entire lesson, the entire concept of MMT is turned on its head. And there's Illuminati. The Illuminati are in charge of the Federal Reserve, or the Rothschilds are in charge of the Federal Reserve. And it's out of the government's purview. So that is the skepticism that you're going to go and research after we're done. The truth is whatever the truth is. And if that's what the truth is, then fine. But I'm asking you to postpone that till afterwards. Tonight, I'm telling you that the Federal Reserve is at the command of Congress. Command of Congress in a couple of steps, but ultimately the command of Congress. Okay, so the Constitution of the United States, Article 1, Section 8, says that the Congress is the monopoly currency issuer. They get to issue the currency. How do they create the currency? They write a number into a bill, such as $1.4 trillion for their tax cuts earlier this year, last year. $1.4 trillion was written into the bill. That bill is signed into law, and money is born. That's it. That's all it takes. Then it's signed into law by the president, and then the Treasury, then the Federal Reserve, and so on and so on. So the monopoly currency issuer, the federal government, the Congress, is the monopoly currency issuer. That means that they are allowed to create the dollar as much as they want, whenever they want, for whatever they want. And they're the only ones in the world that are allowed to do it. This is really not that different than a child drawing a $1 trillion bill onto a piece of construction paper. It is not that different from ticking up the score on a scoreboard at a game. They do it because they want to do it. Money is born because Congress wants to create money. So for the federal government, money is infinite. They need to be responsible, which you'll understand. We'll get into that later. They need to do it in a responsible way, but they certainly could create infinite money. So we are a fiat currency, okay? That means that our money is not backed by gold. Our money has not been backed by gold since August of 1971. Starting before August of 1971, we had so much gold. We still have the gold, but we have so much gold, and before August of 1971, the government said this much gold is exchanged for this many dollars. And then when you double the amount of dollars, then you have the value of that dollars, roughly speaking. But since August of 1971, we are not on the gold standard anymore. We are a fiat currency. That means our money is not backed by anything physical. This is the same kind of economy as Japan, Australia, Canada, England, New Zealand, and I believe the European Union. There's some difference, I believe. So, you and I use the currency. We certainly can't create it. We could try, but we'll go to federal prison for counterfeiting. We are currency users. Me, you, our families, our companies, our municipalities, our towns and cities, states, and other countries, China and Russia, we are all currency users. We are not allowed to create the currency. You and I require income before we can spend. We require a paycheck. We require our patron pledges. We require the income from selling merchandise. We require income. We must get money from somewhere before we can spend. We're not allowed to create the currency. We must get it from somebody else before we can spend. But the federal government can create as much money as it wants, whenever it wants, for whatever it wants, and it is the only one in the world that is allowed to do it. So if you were the federal government, no. Does the federal government require any income? Do they require any income? Do they need to go and get the money from somebody else before they can spend? They can create as much money as they want, whenever they want, for whatever they want, and they're the only ones that are allowed to do it. With that power, do they need income? And the answer is, of course, excuse me. I guess that was cliffhanger, right? And the answer is, of course, no. They don't need any income. They can create the money whenever they want, so why would they need income? They can just create new money. So for me and you, we must get money from somewhere else before we can spend it. The federal government doesn't need to get it from anywhere else. They can just create it. So for the federal government only, to create money is exactly the same thing as saying to spend money. So the federal government, when they create money, they are spending money into the economy. When they are spending money into the economy, that means that they have created it. It is the same thing. It is not the same thing for me and you. It is completely different. So if you didn't need any income, if you could create as much money as you want, if you could create as much money as you want, whenever you want, for whatever you want, and you were the only one in the world that was allowed to do it, you don't need any income. So if you didn't need any income, would you need to borrow money from somebody? Does the federal government need to borrow money from China? Is there any situation where that, number one, is necessary, and number two, makes sense? China doesn't make our money. We make it. We can make as much as we want. Why do we need to get it from somebody else? Why do we need to borrow money from China? We hear that all the time. What does it mean if you don't need any income? What does it mean to be in debt? What does it mean to be in debt? Being in debt means I have to borrow it from somebody, so I owe them. I don't need to borrow money from anybody because I can create it. So what does it mean to be in debt? Who would we pay back even if we could get into debt? So just something to think about. And finally, the beginning of the beginning, and that term I learned from Fidel Kaboub. The beginning of the beginning, 1776, the United States, not a single dollar has been created yet. The government was just created, not a single dollar was created. Can the government come to you and say, you owe me $100 in taxes? Is that possible? You have not given any money to the people yet. Can you turn to the people and say, you owe me taxes, $100? Of course not. You have to give them money. You have to spend money into the economy before your people can pay you taxes. Okay, so again, let's go back to the original question. Excuse me for a moment. So let's go back to the original question. I don't know if these comments are going to work. I guess not. but the common answers that I get for why do we pay federal taxes? Oh, I see Jack Archer put something in there. Why do we pay federal taxes? What are they used for? And the answers that I've gotten in the lessons where I give one person a one-on-one lesson, the answers that I've gotten recently are to offset the deficit. We have a deficit, we spend too much money, so we have to offset that deficit, and one way of doing that is by collecting federal taxes. Federal taxes are used to pay for Social Security, pay for infrastructure, pay for healthcare, pay for all of these federal programs. These are the answers that I normally get when I talk to people one-on-one. And it's perfectly reasonable because that's all we ever hear. That's all our politicians, the media, education system, and our experts, that's all they tell us, is that's what our taxes are used for. So they say that taxes are used to pay for things. Taxes are used to pay for things. But we just discussed that the federal government, and we're only talking about the federal level here, but we just discussed that the federal level does not need any income. So why would they need money from our taxes? Why would they need money from our taxes? So that conflicts. The federal government doesn't need income, as we just discussed, yet most people think that our federal taxes pay for things. That's a conflict. So one has to be wrong, or a combination of both. Which one do you believe more? And of course, I would hope that you believe that the federal government just does not need income. They can create the money. So federal taxes do not pay for anything. So the one thing that most people think that federal taxes actually do, they don't do at all. Federal taxes do not fund federal spending. Federal spending funds federal taxes. I'll say that again. Federal taxes do not fund federal spending. Federal spending funds federal taxes. So federal taxes, they don't pay for anything because the government doesn't need any income, because they can just create whatever they want, whenever they want, for whatever they want. And they're the only ones that are allowed to do it. They're the monopoly currency issuer. But they also, federal spending funds federal taxes. You cannot pay for taxes. You cannot pay your taxes, federal taxes, until you are given $1 from the government. So this saying, from Ellis Winningham, federal taxes do not fund federal spending. Federal spending funds federal taxes. So federal taxes are very important to the functioning of our society. They are very important, but they're not used to pay for anything. So we'll come back to that later. But here is the big lie. The big lie is that the federal government is just like you and me. The big lie is that the federal government is just like you and me. The federal government requires income before they can spend. And every other lie is based on that one. And this will be perfectly clear when we get to the end. Every other lie is based on the big lie that the federal government is just like you and me, and they require income before they can spend. They must get the money from somebody else before they can spend on federal programs. So the final section, a big section, but the final section of the first part is the Pony for All Act of 2018. Every woman and child, every man, woman, and child in the country will be given access to a free pony if they want one by law. So this is a ridiculous situation, but I want to spend a few minutes and take it seriously because it's going to teach something important. So Hillary Clinton
in her book, said, oh, it's nice that you want to give everybody a pony, Bernie. Everybody would love to have a pony, but how are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for it? So again, it is ridiculous to want to do this. But I am telling you that it is genuinely possible for all 320 million Americans, every man, woman, and child, to have their own pony, a biological, actual pony. And you and I are congressmen, and it is our job to write this law. And we need to know exactly, logistically, step by step, how this is going to happen, because we need to write it into the law. So we're going to have some assumptions before we get started, though. Number one assumption is that money is no object. Money is completely infinite. Our government is not corrupt. We have a good faith government. President Trump has committed to signing the Pony for All Act of 2018. And we have the best people in the world at our disposal as far as organization and management and logistics. It's all good. But my question to you, what we're going to try and figure out now, is how do we make this law a reality? It's ridiculous, but it is genuinely possible to happen. How can it happen? So the first step is to determine what, I can't look at these comments now, I just can't process it, I'm sorry. After this section I'll look. So our first step is to determine, how do we make this happen? We have, how many Americans do we have? We have 320 million Americans. Every single one of them is going to get a pony. How many ponies do we have currently now? Very roughly speaking, about 500,000, 500,000. So we have 320 million, 500,000 ponies. Our demand far outstrips our supply. So if we wanted this to happen and we tried to say tomorrow, utter chaos. Prices would go nuts. There would be black markets. There would be fights. It would be a mess. So the question is, the big question is how do we fix this? I guess we could kill all but 500,000 people in the country. That would be one solution. Wouldn't choose that solution. Or we could get ponies from 500,000 to 320 million. How do we do that? Mommy and daddy ponies need to do their thing over and over again. So how long would that take? How long would that take? Ponies just pump away, reproduce as fast as possible. How long would it take to create from 500,000 to expand that to 320 million? So we need to know their gestation period. Let's assume it's 9 months. We need to know how long after birth that the mother can go again. Let's say it's 2 months, so we're talking 11 months. So every 11 months, a mommy pony can go again. So how long will it take to expand from 500,000 ponies to 320 million? I have no clue, but let's say 15 years. Let's say 15 years. So now we are on our way to creating 320 million ponies. We're on our way. But now, this has massive consequences. What are those consequences? The population of ponies is exploding. So we could take care of 500,000 ponies, no problem. We currently do. But now the population is exploding. In 15 years, it's going to be 320 million. So now we need a lot more food. We need more water. We need more horseshoes. We need more fencing, more shelters. We need people to care for the grass that all of them are going to be eating. I think they eat grass. I actually don't know, but let's pretend. And if we need more horseshoes, that means we need more blacksmiths. We need more veterinarians. We need more caretakers. We need more breeders. We need more people to do whatever else is necessary. That means we need to educate new veterinarians. 320 million ponies, we're going to need a lot more veterinarians, a lot more blacksmiths, and so on. We need to take the time to educate them. How long is that going to take? How many do we need? How many will one... I'll take that back. How long will it take to educate all of this new labor? We have plenty of people ready and willing to do it, but we need to educate them and then get them to where they need to go. This is going to create new industries, a new industry and ancillary industries. And now because we have all these ponies and everybody's going to eventually want one, we need to distribute all across the United States, the ponies and the supplies. We need to create new farms all around the country, each with all of their own things, labor and the fencing and all that stuff and all the services that are needed. Okay, so now we are on our way to 320 million ponies. We're actually taking care of them. They have the supplies that they need. And now it's time for the people to pick them up. It's 15 years later. Now the people, we get to the stage of planning what happens when the people actually pick them up. So the people go to the Ponies R Us stores, I guess, and they pick up their ponies. And what's going to happen? Well, they have no clue how to take care of ponies. Their houses aren't prepared. So we need to train these people. We need to prepare their homes for these ponies, especially if they live in unusual locations like cities. How's that going to work? Maybe like community pony areas, like community gardens kind of a thing. Who knows? We need to train the people. We need to prepare the people. The people need all of these services and supplies that we just said. They need to have food in their homes. They need to have shelters at their homes. They need to have access to veterinarians and access to blacksmiths, access to support. They need to have assistance if necessary, just generalized assistance. And then finally, we need to determine what happens when a pony dies. Disposal, replacement. Okay? So that's everything. So that's beginning to end. That's the entire life cycle. So it takes 15 years to create 320 million ponies, and it creates all of these industries, all of these consequences, and this is how we deal with those consequences. And now, from beginning to end, the entire life cycle, we now know how to implement this law. So my question is now, we know what it takes. We know it takes 15 years. And it's going to create a lot of jobs. But what if we wanted to do it quicker? What if we wanted to do it in 5 years? And the federal government said, we're going to throw $10 trillion at it. Just go for it. We are going to make this happen. We are throwing $10 trillion at it. Does that make a difference? Will that actually make it happen in 5 years? And the answer is no, it won't. Because $10 trillion doesn't change biological processes. It doesn't change the gestation period. It doesn't change the time that we need to educate people. It doesn't change any of the real resources that we actually have. So no matter how much money we throw at this, we must wait 15 years to make this happen. And the point is that to the federal government, money doesn't matter. Money is infinite to the federal government. But what matters is real resources. And if we spend beyond the capacity of what our real resources can handle, beyond our productive capacity, we're going to cause incredible problems. Huge, just like we said, what if we didn't do anything and we just said go for your pony on day one with 500,000, there would be chaos, fights, prices going crazy, black markets, chaos. Money doesn't matter to the federal government. Only real resources matter. And it takes 15 years for our real resources to make this possible. Real resources are things in the ground, things that grow, human labor, and time. So even though we have all these real resources, if we try and squeeze it into 5 years, it doesn't work. We need time for the gestation period and education and preparation and everything. Money doesn't matter to the federal government. Only real resources matters. Only our productive capacity matters. Our capacity to produce. Okay, so that's the end of section 1. Let's see how I did. well, 40 minutes. I started 20 minutes early, though. So actually, that was like 20 couple minutes. Let me look at some of your comments now. Where are we? Here we go. Unfortunately, I don't know. Yeah, unfortunately, all I can see are the past maybe 20 comments or something. So if people are going to repeat important comments or something, but I'm not going to be able to see them until afterwards, it's a shame. Oh, you told me how to pronounce your name and I forget. Forgive me. Care Emmanuel? The federal government can fully fund the states, which could eliminate state taxes if they wanted to. That's interesting. Yeah, I guess they could. How would you... Okay, Eric Bloom. How would you answer those on the left who don't necessarily deny what you are explaining, excuse me, but are deeply skeptical that even if what MMT describes is technically accurate, because at the federal level, any meaningful headway is possible, because in Congress, with rare exceptions, I guess, they are all beholden to donors, especially those tied to the military-industrial complex. They're not going to do anything about this. This is not about changing our politicians, because they ain't going to be changed. Our politicians are... Our government is irreparably corrupt. There is no redeeming it, is my opinion. This is not a matter of convincing politicians. This is not a matter of fighting the powerful. This is not a matter of educating the powerful or educating the politicians. This is a matter of stop fighting ourselves, stop fighting the people, get the people to stop fighting each other, and to educate the people. Because then we can replace the corrupt government, the corrupt politicians, with people that actually understand modern money and care about the people. That's what we do. We cannot do anything about our corrupt politicians except get them out of office. But the first step of getting them out of office is to stop fighting ourselves and to teach ourselves the tricks that they use against us. And modern money is one of the major tricks, or explains one of a bunch of the major tricks that they use against us. So what was your question specifically? What do I say to those on the left? Learn modern money and then organize and stop falling for their tricks, because we fall for a ton of tricks and waste most of our time on those tricks instead of just working towards getting them out of Congress. That's my response. You could do a follow-up if I didn't get everything for you. Too much money in too few hands equals the demise of national economy, as if the country was being robbed. An economy that is equally distributed will continually regenerate itself. You're not really into ponies? Yeah, okay. Thank you, Stephanie. That's very nice of you. Cora. Yes, you told me that before, and I'm terrible with names, especially with people who only are a tiny little circular image. All right, I think I'm going to start part 2. Excuse me, let me just fill my water. Okay, and you know what? Who asked that question? Eric Bloom. This is going to become, I think you're going to be able to answer this question yourself at the end. It's going to be much more obvious. I think it's going to be much more obvious at the end of this. So consider just bringing up that again near the end. is that many think we don't have 15 years. It is what it is. If we don't learn the truth, we can't get anything done. If we keep falling for the tricks, the truth doesn't change because there's a rush. You got to learn the truth. There's what other choice is there? What do we do? The truth is what the truth is. All it takes is a couple hours of attention, and then you're over the initial hump, and then you're off to the experts, and you learn for yourself. All right, part 2. Why do we collect federal taxes? Because we already came to the conclusion, that federal taxes do not pay for anything. So why do we collect federal taxes? Because they are very important to the functioning of our society. So there's the purpose of money, and then there's 2 major uses of money. I'm sure there's others, but these are the 3 big ones that I'm aware of. Purpose. The purpose of money is to drive, no, I said money. Taxes. The purpose of taxes, and then 2 uses of taxes. The purpose of taxes is to drive the currency and drive the economy. So again, the beginning of the beginning, and I learned this from Fidel Kabub. 1775, there's 13 colonies. They come over from Britain. They wanted, they're angry with the British. We want to be our own country. So we're about to write the Declaration of Independence. We're going to write the Constitution. The United States dollar has not yet been created. So what are the things that we need to do? We need to fight the British. We need to grow our crops. We need to build buildings. We need to do infrastructure, whatever that means back in the 1700s. I guess wooden bridges and so on. Streets. So we need to do things. The government needs things to be done. So at first, maybe everybody's enthusiastic. Oh, I want to be independent. Let's get those horrible British people. And, they fight the war because they're just enthusiastic. They just want to do it. But soon enough, that enthusiasm is going to wane for a significant amount of people. Family members are going to die. They're going to get tired. They're just going to be, done with it. So now we have to compel the people because we must fight the British. We must grow our crops and build our buildings and so on. We must. So we must compel the people to do so. So what can we do? Well, one solution would be to get soldiers to go out and just point guns at everybody's heads. You will grow my crops. You will fight the British. You will build my buildings. And sure, while the gun is pointed to their heads, they'll do it. And as soon as the gun goes down, they'll stop. So how else can we compel them? It would be nice to be able to compel them without violence, without horrible stuff. So we give them money. We give them maybe $10 a week to fight our war. We give them a couple dollars a week to whatever it is, to build our buildings and to pave our roads and to grow our crops. We give them money. But they tell us, here's $1. Here's the United States dollar. We just created it. It's just for you. And they go, what's $1? I don't want $1. I've never seen one of these before. I have British pounds. All my neighbors have British pounds. We're fine with that. We're just going to keep going with that. And then they said, no, we want to be the United States of America. We don't want to be an extension of Britain, United Kingdom, whatever. So this is what we're going to do. You are going to use the dollar because we're going to make you pay taxes. In April of next year, you're going to have to pay some of that back in taxes. And the penalty for not doing that is that you go to jail. So you are going to pay taxes in the money that we just gave you because you're doing these things for us. But you're going to pay some of those back in taxes. And if you don't, we're going to fine you, we're going to confiscate your property, but ultimately you will go to jail. And so now the people care about the money. Now they go and actually find jobs to get the United States dollar because they have to pay those taxes in April. And that's what it means to drive the currency and drive the economy. Taxes force the people to use the currency that only the federal government can create. Because if they don't, they go to jail. And if they try to create it themselves, they go to federal prison for counterfeiting. So that's what it means to drive the currency and drive the economy. So I want to say what the purpose of a good faith government is. The purpose of a good faith government is what I just said, almost said a minute ago, to compel the people to use the resources at its disposal for the benefit of society. And money is the incentive that they give the people to do those things. So when I give you $5, I need my $5 back. I mean, I could be charitable, but I need my $5 back. When the government gives you $5, they may tax $1 back, but you did work for the government. So the purpose of a good faith government is to give money to the people and to only tax a small amount back, because that gives them incentive that allows them to do the work and that allows them to save and invest and spend their money and have some pocket change. Okay, so that's drive the currency and drive the economy. A use of taxes is to control demand. And it's important to define inflation here, because I used to say control inflation, but that's not really right. If we did the 320 million people trying to get 500,000 ponies, things go crazy. Prices go nuts. Black market. Chaos. And I used to say that that's inflation. It's not. Because inflation is not when the price of bread goes up. Inflation is not when the price of ponies go up. Inflation is not when the entire industry around ponies goes up. Inflation is when every single product in the entire United States that is purchased with the United States dollar, every one of those, the prices go up for everything, and they keep going up. That's inflation. Inflation is a macroeconomic phenomenon. So anything smaller than that is not inflation. You can say prices are going to go up and there'll be chaos in black markets within that more narrow area, but it is not correct to say that that's inflation. So a use of taxes is to control demand, which could be the beginning of inflation long down the road. Control demand. So World War II. In August of 1971, we went off the gold standard with a bunch of other countries that I said: Japan, Australia, Canada, Great Britain or United Kingdom, the Euro, not 1971, but New Zealand. We all went off of the gold standard in August of 1971. But back in the end of the Depression to the end of the World War II, we also went off the gold standard, just the United States. World War II happened, and all of our car companies, all of a sudden, because the war began, they stopped making cars, and they took all of their real resources, steel, rubber, plastic, cloth, and diverted it to the war. They started making tanks and airplanes and boats and artillery. Not a single car was produced during World War II. And if that's not exactly correct, it's close to correct. Not a single car was produced. New car was produced. I guess you don't produce used cars anyway. Not a single new car was produced during World War II. And although the war changed people's behaviors in general, generally speaking, they had the same amount of money in their pockets, and they had the same demand, interest in new cars. So we have all these people that want new cars, and all of a sudden we have no new cars to give them. This is a big problem. This could cause chaos. Very bad problems. And we have to solve this problem. And we can solve this problem with a stick, or we could solve this problem with a carrot. So we could compel the people. No, there's only one of two options. I'm jumping ahead. There's only one of two options. We could increase the supply of cars, or we could decrease the demand for cars. So in this particular situation, we cannot increase supply because the war is critical. The real resources must go to the war. So there's only one solution here. Or actually, I should say, you can increase supply, decrease demand, or some combination of the two. We cannot increase supply in this situation. So we must decrease demand. We must. How can we do that? We can compel them. We could make it a law. We could, huge penalty, whatever it is. Or we could use a carrot. We could give them a positive incentive to divert their money to something more enticing, something more interesting than a new car. And this is what the government did. The government offered the people war bonds. So they advertised these war bonds as fund the troops. No, not fund. Support the troops. Support the war effort. Buy a war bond. So people could choose to be patriotic and spend whatever they want on a war bond. So we'll say $1,000. So that $1,000, they would purchase a war bond from the federal government, and they wouldn't use that money to purchase a car. So they would buy a bond, and it would be maybe 10 years, and it would give a 5% bonus when it matured. So $1,000 was given to the government. The person got a fancy piece of paper that said, my name, $1,000, 1955, 5%. That's when it matures, with 5% interest. And now money was removed from the economy. It reduced demand, and it worked. It wasn't the only tool, but it was a major tool. And, okay. So war bonds reduced demand. And war bonds are very similar to taxes. Taxes can reduce demand. Taxes remove money from the economy. So taxes are coercive. Bonds are voluntary. Taxes, obviously, taxes do not provide a bonus, a 5% interest bonus. Bonds provide a bonus if you hold the money for that length. Bonds are held for, in this case, 10 years and then given back. Taxes are held for infinite years. They're never given back. And compelled, taxes are compelled, just to clarify. If you don't pay, you go to jail. You have to pay them. War bond is voluntary. You can choose to buy a war bond or not. But they're very similar. But here is the mind-bending part of it. When a bond is purchased, that money doesn't go to the government. It's not given to the government. What happens is that the money is deleted from the person's bank account. Nothing happens on the government side. Same thing with taxes. With taxes, on my tax return, I say I pay $1,000 in taxes. I write it down, $1,000 in taxes. I send in my tax return. They take my tax return, they see $1,000 in taxes, and that authorizes the federal government to go into your bank account, talk to the bank, but go into the bank account, your bank account, and lower your bank account balance by $1,000. They do nothing on their side. They don't raise anything on their side. The only thing on their side is that tax return that just notates that you paid $1,000. They put that tax return in a filing cabinet or on a folder on a computer, and that's it. They don't use the money for anything. It's same with a war bond. $1,000 war bond. You authorize the government to lower your amount by $1,000. They give you a bond. They write it down somewhere in a spreadsheet, a line in a spreadsheet. Your name, $1,000, 10 years, what year it matures, 5% interest. They write it down, but they don't use your $1,000 for anything. So when the government creates money, it is born, just like writing a $1 trillion bill onto a piece of construction paper. And when it's taxed, or when it's given as purchasing a war bond, it's erased. It dies. When Congress creates the money, it's born. And it dies when we pay taxes or when we purchase a war bond. With a war bond, it comes back to life. So at the end of when the bond matures, 10 years in this case, they create the currency again to pay that person their $1,000 plus 5%. They create the currency. The government doesn't hold your money. It is not accurate to say that the government, that the federal government has money. And it also is not accurate to say that the federal government does not have money. I think that's it for that. Okay, so that's all for controlling demand. The final use for taxes that we're going to discuss is imposing moral decisions. This is easy to understand. So we want to discourage vices, drugs, alcohol, gambling, cigarettes. We want to discourage them. We don't want to stop it entirely. You can do it. We just don't want it to reach such a level that you're harming society. Because if enough people are addicted or take it beyond what's healthy, then it affects our country at a macroeconomic scale. Starts affecting our healthcare system, starts affecting our mental health care system, our financial system with gambling, whatever. So we want to discourage gambling to make it expensive to go excessive. But for activities that cause pollution, we want to shut it down. If we were a good faith government, we want to shut pollution down. We want to make people, to discourage people from ever buying another gas guzzler again. So we want those taxes to go way up. We want those taxes to be very high. So we judge at how much we want to slow behaviors down by the amount of taxes that we put on them. The other side, we want to encourage behaviors by raising taxes. No, lowering taxes. We want to encourage behaviors by lowering taxes. So we want to encourage gym memberships. That puts less pressure on our country's healthcare system. We want to lower taxes on, we want to encourage activities that do not cause pollution, that prevent pollution, solar panels, electric cars, and so on. So we want to encourage positive behaviors that help society, that benefit society. So discourage behaviors with higher taxes, encourage behaviors with lower taxes. And one more example of discouraging behavior. We want to discourage immoral levels of income inequality. We want to discourage someone from having an obscene amount of power, of money. So we as a society could decide that we say, we have no problem with you being rich, but we're going to create this threshold where when you go above that, it's really not possible to be rich, to get more rich, unless you start extracting wealth from the well-being of others, profiting off of our sickness, profiting off of our suffering, profiting off of our death. It's not possible once you reach that level to get more rich unless you start hurting other people. We're far beyond that. We are to a level where people are so rich that they can buy politicians and therefore create the laws making it all easier in their favor. Our level of income inequality is, to say it's immoral is an understatement. So we need to take away their money, not all of it, not all of it, just above that threshold that society decides is obscene, is reasonable. Here's obscene, below it is reasonable. So let's say $500 million. Society decides that $500 million is that threshold. You can enjoy your money, have it, and do whatever you want. Have fun. But once you exceed that threshold that society has decided, you are going to be taxed dramatically. I don't know what that number is. What would it be? 75%, 90%? I have no idea. Just the obscene part, not the part that our society decides is fine. Because we must take away some of your power. It is not reasonable that a few people can purchase our politicians. It is not reasonable that they can take away our politicians from us because they don't represent us anymore. They pretend to represent us, but they don't represent us anymore. They represent the people who can buy them. So we tax the rich because it is moral and just and equitable and right. But we don't tax them because we need their money. And to most people that I say this to after we go through this whole lesson up to this point, to most people that I say this to, that is very surprising. Even though everything that we've spoken about up till now makes it obvious that that's the case. We don't tax the rich for their money. We must tax the rich, but not because we need their money. We must tax the rich because it is the right thing to do, my opinion. So not only should we not tax the rich for their money, not only should we not tax them for their money, we cannot tax them for their money. It is impossible to tax them for their money because of how our economy works. Okay, so one last point about this is that modern money does not say that we should be taxing the wealthy. It doesn't say that we shouldn't be taxing the wealthy. It doesn't say how much we should tax the wealthy. What modern money tells us, though, is that if we tax the wealthy, that it could have macroeconomic effects that lower income inequality. And I, as a progressive, choose to take that knowledge and to tax the rich to get rid of income inequality, immoral levels of income inequality. I take that knowledge, and which is not telling me what to do, but I take that knowledge and I decide as a progressive to tax the rich. So, modern money is knowledge. It is a description. It is not a prescription. It does not tell you what to do or not to. And this is the last part of part 2. It does not tell you what to do. It does not tell you what not to do. Modern money is the reality of how our economy works, how the economy of the United States government, a fiat currency, works. Whether you learn it or not, whether you believe it or not, it is the reality. It is the truth. So, other disciplines of knowledge. When you learn the knowledge of medicine, you can choose to take that knowledge and cure people. You could choose to do Nazi experiments on people. You could choose to not practice medicine at all. With the knowledge of religion, you could choose to practice Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Hindu. You could choose to practice Satanism. You could choose to not practice. You could choose to be an atheist or an agnostic. With a socket wrench, you could choose to put that socket wrench in your toolbox. You could choose to throw it out and never use it again. You could choose to beat people over the head with it. Or you could choose to unscrew stuff. We don't blame the socket wrench because someone chose to take a socket wrench and beat people over the head with it. It's not the fault of the socket wrench. Same thing with modern money. With the knowledge of modern money, you can choose to help the people, or you could choose to screw the people. We have a government that chooses to screw the people. It's not the fault of modern money. Yet a lot of people seem to choose to not learn modern money because all they see are the bad faith people who take that knowledge and abuse the people. It's not the fault of modern money. Modern money is neutral. That knowledge can be used for good or for evil or not at all. And so our government officials are cheating. They're screwing us. And you can't fight the cheaters, just like the Federal Reserve thing we talked about in the beginning. Maybe it is Rothschilds. Maybe it is the Illuminati. Maybe they're cheating, even though the Constitution says that that's not right. You can't fight the cheaters if you don't know the rules. Modern money is the rules. That's the end of part 2. Let's see your comments. Oh, here we go. Cora. All right. Oh, goodness. What are these comments? Let me see if I can see this in another way. Progressives. Here we go. Let's see if I can see these. Oh, I guess. Okay. Let's see. This is the shizzle, my brizzles, and sizzles. Okay. Yeah. Core. Oh gosh, I hope I remembered how you said core. Yeah, we're going to talk about Social Security later. All right, I don't see comments. I don't see that many comments. There's really not much to respond to here. All right. I'm still looking. Yeah, this is very different. Thank you, Crystal. This is very different. This feels much smoother. I think it's getting to the point where it's starting. I mean, I need feedback, but I think it's getting to the point where it's starting to become solid. And if there are places where it could become shorter, then that's going to start to come clear to me, and maybe start making slides or whatever it is. I don't know. But it does feel a big improvement over previous versions. I'm not panicking. I also don't have as many notes. I have more outlines, as not as in depth. All right, I don't see many comments to address here. I'm sure there are a lot more, but Facebook is not showing me them. I only see like 15 comments. So I guess I'll go on to part 3. Okay, part 3. The big lie. The big lie is that the federal government is just like you, and they're the economy of the federal government. The economy of the federal government is just like the economy of you and me, that we need income before we can spend. And the big lie says that the federal government needs income before it can spend. Every other lie is based on that. So if you or me go to a bank and we borrow $100, we are immediately in debt to that bank for $100. we owe them $100 plus interest. And if we don't pay that bank back, they're not going to take it lightly. They're going to make our lives pretty bad. Debt collectors, take us to court. Horrible letters to our house. They will make a big stink that we're not paying them back. But what about the federal government? If you can create the currency as much as you want, whenever you want, for whatever you want, do you need to borrow anything? Because nobody else is allowed to create the money. And you can create it infinitely. You have to be responsible, as we've spoken about. You have to not do it faster than your resources can handle. But you can create it infinitely. No one else can create it at all. Do you need to borrow it from anybody else? It doesn't make sense. We hear a lot that we're borrowing more than ever from China. Why do we need to borrow from China at all? It doesn't make sense. All of our politicians in the media and our education system and our so-called experts scream about, we are in debt. We have to pay back this debt. The debt clock in New York says that $21 trillion we owe, and every family, every man, woman, and child owes $100,000 towards the debt, and we've got to pay it off. What does it mean to be in debt if you are the federal government who can create the currency infinitely, and you're the only one that's allowed to do it? What does it mean to be in debt? And even if you were in debt, who would you pay it back to? Who is the bank in this situation? Because I hear our politicians saying, we've got to pay it back. Our grandchildren are going to be, bankrupted by our debt if we don't pay it back. But I don't hear anything from the people who are owed that money. I don't hear any complaints of, hey, United States, you owe us money, and where is it? We're going to send the super police. We don't hear anything from those people. All we hear are the politicians saying, we owe our debt. We don't hear it from the people who are owed. Who do we owe? Who do we owe this money to? The Decepticons in outer space? Who do we owe this money to? Why would we owe any money to China? What does that mean, we owe money to China? I mean, yeah, they could have $5 trillion in treasury bills or bonds or in some investment. So we write up $5 trillion on a piece of construction paper. Done, they're paid. What's the point here? Saying that the United States government is in debt is not just incorrect. It's completely nonsensical. There is something called the national debt. There is technically the debt, but it is nothing like when I borrow $100 from the bank, I'm in debt to the bank. I owe them $100 plus interest. There is no comparison. To say that it's different is the understatement of understatements. It has nothing to do with it. It is nonsensical to say that the federal government is in debt. Who do we pay it back to? What does it even mean to pay it back? So here is the technical definition. I'm going to give a technical definition of what the national debt is, and then I'm going to explain it in an easy way to understand. So the technical definition of the national debt is all of the money that has been spent into the economy since our country began that has not yet been taxed back. All of the money that has been spent into the economy by the federal government, by Congress, since the beginning of our country that has not yet been taxed back. That's the technical definition. The easier way of understanding it, though, the national debt is the total of every American's, and all currency users of China too, but Every American's investments, bank accounts, and wallet, all of the money that we have in our investments, our bank accounts, and our wallets, the total. It's our value. It's the value of the American people. So if we really, really wanted to pay the debt, if we wanted to really pay back the debt, if we wanted to get it down to zero, because that's paying it back, logically speaking, we're paying the debt, we're getting our $21 trillion debt down to zero, we could draw a $21 trillion bill on a piece of construction paper, debt's paid off, done. I don't know who we pay it to, but it's paid off. Or we could empty out every single American's, all of their investments, all of their bank accounts, and their wallets. Get them all down to zero. Empty them out entirely. The debt's been paid. I don't think that's a good idea. So that's the debt. Now, balanced budget, deficit, and surplus. Me and you. Remember the big lie. The economy of the federal government is exactly like the economy of me and you. That's the big lie. The deficit, me and you. Let's start with the balanced budget. So this week, I budgeted $100 for food, for my family, for my gas in my car. And at the end of the week, I budgeted $100 this week for everything, gas, food, family. And at the end of the week, I spent exactly $100. I could not have done it better. I could not have budgeted better. I could not have been more fiscally responsible. Surplus, me and you. I budgeted $100 for everything for this week, gas, food, so on. At the end of the week, I only needed to spend $85. I had $15 left over. I could take my wife to a movie. I was even more fiscally responsible. Deficit, me and you. I budget $100 this week for everything. At the end of the week, unfortunately, I had to dip into my savings and take $20 out because I had to spend $120. I messed up, something unfortunate happened, whatever it was. I was not as responsible this week. I was a little fiscally irresponsible this week. Okay, so that's us. And now let's go to the opposite world for the federal government. The media and our politicians and our education system and our experts tell us that the balanced budget is responsible, the surplus is responsible, and the deficit is irresponsible, fiscally responsible. Fiscally irresponsible, the deficit. So let's remember what the purpose of a good faith government is. The purpose of a good faith government is to compel the people, without putting a gun to their head, to compel the people to use its resources for the benefit of society. And money is how they compel the people and taxes is, how they make the money, how they drive the money. To compel the people to use its resources to do what benefits society. And money is the incentive that's given to them for it. Beginning of the beginning, those things were fighting the British, growing the crops, building the buildings. Balanced budget for the federal government, which everybody tells us is fiscally responsible. Balanced budget for the federal government. I spend $100 into the economy to tell people to do the things that are beneficial for society, or to implement some law. And then in April, I tax all $100 back. I spent $100 into the economy. I taxed $100 back, 100%. What do the people have in their pockets? Nothing. They have nothing. They can't invest. They can't save. They can't spend. All they can do is pay their taxes. And the only way that they can spend is to dip into their savings or their investments or their wallets, their value. They have to, all the money that the government gave us has to be paid right back to the government. So why did they give us that money to begin with? And in order to spend, to do anything we need to do to survive, we have to dip into our savings. So that's a balanced budget for the federal government. That's, we're told, is fiscally responsible for the federal government to do. Surplus for the federal government, again, we're told is fiscally responsible. President Clinton, the last 2 years he had in office, he had a surplus. He was hailed as responsible. What a wonderful, responsible thing to do. And it contributed to a recession that hit not so far after. Surplus, fiscally responsible. The federal government spends $100 into the economy, so the people do stuff for society. In April, they tax back $120. They gave him $100, you're going to pay me back $120. What do the people have? They have nothing, and they have even more than nothing. They cannot spend without dipping into their value. They cannot invest without taking away from their value. They cannot spend without taking away from their value. They can't even pay their taxes without dipping into their savings account, without taking from their value. And again, what is the purpose of spending money into the economy if you take it all right back? You're supposed to tax some of it, but you don't tax all of it if you're a good faith government. That doesn't make sense. That's no different than putting a gun to the people's heads and telling them to do stuff for the benefit of society and giving them nothing in return. Sure, you give them $100, but they're not allowed to spend it because they have to give it all right back. It can't go through the economy. It goes right back to the government. So finally, the deficit for the federal government, which we are told is fiscally irresponsible. So the federal government spends $100 into the economy so they can do what society needs to be done with the real resources. And in April, they tax back $30. What do the people have? They have $70 in their pockets. So now they can spend, they can invest, they can save, and of course they can easily pay their taxes back because the government is giving them money and they're doing things in exchange for it. So that's the end of the debt, deficit, borrow, balanced budget, and surplus. These are all the sub-lies, all that are based on the big lie. These are all the lies that come from it. And now, finally, the last major subject before the conclusion is Social Security. We are told by everybody, politicians, media, education system, and our so-called experts, we are told that Social Security is going to go broke by 2030. By 2030. And that's 3 years earlier than we thought. What a shame. We're not going to be able to have Social Security in just about 12 years. People want to steal from Social Security, we're told. They want to steal from Social Security to go to do stuff for other people. And we need to borrow from Social Security in order to do stuff for our people. And my question is how can a federal program go broke. If a federal program is funded by the federal government, who creates the currency as much as they want, whenever they want, for whatever they want, and they're the only ones allowed to do it, how can a federal program go broke? How can a federal program be stolen from? How can you borrow from a federal program? So here's what the Social Security Administration is. 1935, the Social Security law was passed. It created the Social Security Administration. The Social Security Administration is an accounting agency, and their only job is to, for each of the senior citizens in our country, each of their beneficiaries, they determine, based on the formulas in the law, how much benefits they're supposed to get, how much money they're supposed to get in benefits. And then they tell the Treasury, this is how much each of these beneficiaries are supposed to get. The Treasury creates the currency and then delivers that money to the people. There is no pot of money for Social Security. There is no bank account for Social Security. There is nothing to steal from. Social Security can go broke. It's not really the right term, but as close as possible, Social Security can go broke. And the only way that that can happen is if our Congress changes the Social Security law to compel the Social Security Administration to give beneficiaries less or nothing. Not because our real resources dictate it, not because there's some external factor that makes that a reasonable decision. It's just because they're choosing to do it. Our politicians can choose to destroy Social Security by forcing them to give lower and lower benefits. And the Treasury can only do what Social Security Administration tells them to do. And this is how we privatize. We defund, which is politicians changing the law to force Social Security to give less. Defund, sabotage, and then a few years later, we look back and say, oh, it broke. We got to privatize it. And oh my goodness, I'm going to get a profit off of it. That's just a coincidence. So the masters of the universe don't just want to privatize Social Security and Medicare and healthcare and education. I mean, they do, and they do want to profit off of us. But they, more than that, they want to push, my opinion, they want to push government out of the way. They want to get rid of government. They don't want to just purchase politicians. They ultimately want government to go away so that we stop getting free programs that's beneficial to society so they can come in and profit off of us. And one last thing about Social Security. Congressional Budget Office, the CBO. This is the organization, agency, whatever, that every major law that's or proposed, bill that's written, is analyzed by the CBO. They're bipartisan, nonpartisan, and they're trustworthy. And as best as I understand, it is a reliable analysis. However, in 1985, under the Reagan administration, a law was passed to compel the CBO to use all of these economic scaremongering terms, such as the debt and the deficit, and determining when Social Security was going to go broke, even though that makes no economic sense. So the CBO has a good analysis, but the most featured part of that analysis is economic scaremongering. So that's the final facts. And now I'm going to go into the conclusion. Racism. Racism is a tool to tear the people apart. Xenophobia is another tool to tear the people apart, so that we are angry at immigrants, foreigners, for stealing our jobs, instead of being angry at the people who choose to hire them, as if the immigrants are forcing them with a gun to hire them. That doesn't make sense. We're angry at the powerless for being hired by a powerful person. We're not angry at the powerful person for choosing an immigrant over an American and paying them less. We're angry at the immigrant. Xenophobia is a tool to tear the people apart. Classism is a tool to tear the people apart. You do not have as much money as me. You are not as good as me. Economic ignorance is a tool to tear the people apart. Our government, our politicians, our education system, our media, and our experts have fed us for our entire lives the perfect storm of misinformation. Everybody fights with everybody. Progressives and Democrats want our taxes raised because we want health care, because we want free college, because we want a federal job guarantee. And not just for us, we want it for everybody. We're not selfish. We want it for everyone. But there is another huge population of people who are terrified of the consequences of their taxes being raised. They know that if we implement any of these programs that we talk about, free college, health, Medicare for all, single payer, living wage, federal job guarantee, that their taxes are going to go up. And they are terrified of the short-term consequences of their taxes going up. They will go bankrupt. Their businesses will go bankrupt. Their families will go bankrupt. Our country will go bankrupt. It is a fact as far as they are concerned. So they say to us, you will not raise my taxes a dime. I will fight against whatever you want if it raises my taxes a dime. I'm not against health care. I'm not against college. But I am against it if it raises my taxes a dime, because not that I'm an unreasonable person, but I am truly terrified of the short-term consequences of my taxes going up. And this is like the earth is flat. We know the earth is round. They think the earth is flat. They know that they will fall off the edge of the earth, the edge of the economic cliff. We know that the world is round. That has nothing to do with it. But they are so convinced that this edge of the earth exists that they will not even step a foot into the boat. They will not even consider the journey because they know that they will fall off the edge of the earth. I learned that from Grant Elwood. Progressives fight each other because I, as someone trying to share modern money, I'm fighting TYT and Kyle Kulinski and the Young Turks. TYT, the Young Turks, Kyle Kulinski, the Humanist Report, Congressional Dish, even Bernie Sanders. They all spew the economic scaremongering. The rich have got to pay their fair share so we can have infrastructure. That blows a hole in the deficit. We're going to explode the debt. We have to find a way to pay for it. This is how we can pay for it. Polls show that most Americans want their taxes used for health care, not for war. The progressive movement and Bernie Sanders and all of these news media, progressive news media, get almost everything right. We can envision what is horrible about our world why it is horrible that we don't have health care. This is what it's like to not have health care. This is what it's like to not have education. This is what it's like to have a starvation wage. This is what it's like if we could have health care. This is what it would be like. This is what the health care would actually look like. This is what it would be like if we had a federal job guarantee. This is how we would do it. So Bernie Sanders and all of the progressive media, and most of progressives, just most progressives, but these are the people that have the millions of ears of people. Most progressives can describe the world of why it's so horrible, and we know it's true, we feel it. And we can describe the world as it should and could be. We can envision the world as it should and could be. We are good at that. All of these people are good at that. But what most of us mess up, what TYT, Kyle Kulinski, Humanist Report, Congressional Dish, and Bernie Sanders, less so with Bernie Sanders getting better, but still, what they mess up is that one step when we actually walk to the door of Congress and demand it and actually try and get it. That's what we mess up. The one step that matters. We go to our Congress and we demand, we want Medicare for all right now. Give it to us. We're dying. We're suffering. And they say to us, oh, I wish I could. I can see how much you want it. Oh, and I know how much it's going to help you. I know how much it's going to alleviate your suffering. But how are we going to pay for it? And instead of going in for the kill and stabbing them, we stab ourselves. We shoot ourselves in the foot. We go all the way back to the end of the line. We do all of our analysis to answer their question of how we're going to pay for it. How we're going to pay for a federal program that doesn't need to be paid for. Not in the way that we think. So progressives fight progressives. Progressives, I guess Democrats, whatever. People that want big programs fight those who don't want taxes. People are fighting the people. But that's not all, because the big lie is that the federal government needs income. And we hear all the time, including from Bernie Sanders, we must tax the rich so they pay their fair share so we can have infrastructure. We must first get money from the rich in order to have the programs that we need to survive. We must first reduce the military in order to get that money and use it instead for programs that we need to survive. You hear people say all the time, I can't believe how wasteful we're being with our military, how much of a bully we are with our military. Just think of what we could use that money for fixing our pipes in Flint, for forgiving student debt, for doing all of these things, if only we didn't use it for the military. So we are told that we must wrest the money from their cold dead hands, from the cold dead hands of the powerful, before we can have any of the programs that we need to survive. So everybody fights everybody, and the masters of the universe just sit back and relax and laugh. Medicare for all. Without having health care, single payer, I know. People say the term single payer. Without having health care, we are chained to our jobs. We cannot leave our jobs, because if we do, we will lose our health insurance, and that we can't survive. So we cannot stand up to our bosses and say, stop abusing me, pay me better, or I'm going to leave. Because they can turn to us and say, leave, you'll lose your health care. I have plenty of people waiting for this job. Go for it. We can't stand up to our bosses, but that's not all. If we had single-payer health care, we could leave our job and still have our health care. We could stand up to our boss and not be as afraid. We could leave our job and run for office and create a good faith government. Get the bad faith people out and get the good faith people in. And that is why we don't have Medicare for all. They want to profit off of our suffering, off of our sickness. They want to. But that's not the biggest thing. The biggest thing is that they want to prevent their They want to not risk their job. They want to keep us powerless. They want to keep us powerless. Caitlin Johnstone taught me this. Power is relative. I cannot stay powerful unless I actively keep you powerless. And Medicare for All is a perfect, not giving the people Medicare for All is the perfect way of keeping the people powerless. Because the second we got Medicare for All, instantaneously, some power is shifted from them to us. Federal job guarantee. With the federal job guarantee, we can stand up to our bosses because we can say, you will stop abusing me. You will pay me a living wage. Because if you don't, I can get a job right near my home with a federal job guarantee with a living wage and benefits. So we can stand up to our bosses. So private corporations must do better than the minimum because the federal job guarantee creates a floor. You don't keep getting wages, raises or promotions in the federal job guarantee, but maybe people want to stay there. So the private corporations, private industry must be better than the minimum if they want to attract people. So this is a way for people to stand up to their bosses, to have power. So this term, natural unemployment, we've all heard this. Natural unemployment. There's a level of unemployment that, say 2%, that if we go below that, if we hire people so that we have only 1% or even 0%, if everybody's employed, that's below the safe level of natural unemployment, and that's going to cause crazy inflation. When the truth is that if we go below that threshold of natural unemployment and we truly get to close to genuinely full unemployment with nobody unemployed, that's very close to a job guarantee, which means that the people can start standing up to their bosses and stop taking their abuse and start demanding a living wage. And they can't have that. That is another tool. Natural unemployment is another tool for keeping the powerless powerless. Because the second we got a federal job guarantee, an enormous amount of power shifts from them to us. So finally, the masters of the universe and their politician employees use the big lie. Federal government's economy is just like mine, yours and mine. They need income before they can spend. The politicians and our media and our education system and our experts, so-called experts, all say the big lie is true. And our politicians use that to hide the fact that they just don't want to give it to us. So the pay for question, how are you going to pay for it? The technical answer is because we want to. We create the money and we have plenty of resources. So we pay for it. If we want it, if we have the resources, we do it. That's the technical answer. But the practical answer is that when we go up to Congress and we say, I demand Medicare for all and we demand it tomorrow. And then they turn to us and they say, oh, I would love to give it to you. I can see how much it would help you. And clearly it's exactly what you need to stop your suffering. But I can't. Because how are we going to pay for it? And this is the only answer, in my opinion, that we should give. And that is, this is how we'll pay for it. We will pay for it by getting you out of office and replacing you with someone who will never ask that question again. And until that day happens, we will make your life a living hell. That's the only answer. That's what we need to do. We need to get our corrupt politicians out of office. We need to educate the people on modern money so we can organize and create a good faith government and use modern money for good, not for evil, to help the people, not just the powerful. So the Democratic Party even lowers their standards. They say, oh, I can't have Medicare for all because that's pie in the sky and too expensive. So they lower their standards. Why do they lower their standards? because they're afraid of losing the vote of those who are afraid of their taxes being raised. So instead of giving the people who are suffering in reality, who are dying in reality, the Democratic Party lowers their standards to cater to the fantastical, economically inaccurate fears of those who don't want their taxes raised. So everything we ask for, everything we demand in a state of economic ignorance. And that's why we don't have anything, because we keep falling for their tricks. We need to learn the truth of how our economic system works, so we stop falling for their tricks. We need to educate the people on modern money, because people need to be angry at the politicians who use the knowledge against us. And until we learn the knowledge, we can never fight them. You can't fight the cheaters if you don't know the rules. Modern money is the rules. And if you choose not to learn modern money, then you are effectively choosing to stay ignorant. And you are choosing to continue to be fooled. And you are guaranteeing that we will never get the things that we need to survive. And that's it. Let's look at your comments. How does this work? The only way for Ray Whitaker, the only way for Social Security to go broke is if our Congress decides to stop spending on Social Security. That's correct. And the way that they would do that is to change the Social Security law to force the Social Security Administration to have to give less and less benefits and maybe eventually zero benefits, in hopes of privatizing. Crystal says it's just, I agree. Yes. We fight and we think we know why we're fighting, and we're all actually fighting over things that make no economic sense. Excuse me. And that's why we need to learn how our economy actually works so that we don't argue. It's fine to disagree over what we want to do. It's fine to disagree over a whole host of things, but to disagree over how the economy actually works is killing us. Orthodox economy theory. I don't know the answer, Matt. I'm not sure I get the whole context of your question. Thank you, Stacy. Is it true that the country is flat broke? I think you need to watch from the beginning, and you will be able to answer that question at the end. Unfortunately, I really don't see that many comments. It's only showing me like 15, 20 comments. So how long did I go this time? Almost 2 hours. So I started about 15, 20 minutes early and maybe 10 minutes early. I really wanted to get it down to an hour, but whatever. It's too long, but it feels a lot more solid now. So one step at a time. I guess that's it. Flat broke. Tay, we can create the money infinitely. That's the very beginning of the video. So yeah, watch this video and your answer will be, you will totally understand that. To say that we're broke, really, it's the opposite. We have infinite money. We have a heck of a lot of resources available to us. We don't use nearly as many. We have tons of flexibility. But as far as money, it's infinite. Watch the video, please. there's not much to respond to. Thank you for listening. Yes, I will look at that later, Elizabeth. I'm not sure. I mean, I obviously couldn't read it while I was doing it. Okay, there's really not here much. There's not much here to address because Facebook is not showing me much. Thank you, Core. I said it right, didn't I? Core. Thank you. Thank you, Susan. You're welcome. So, okay. I'm going to do this again next week. Thanks for being with me. That's it. Good night.